motion coaching. We're starting a little bit late, and I'm recovering from a tiny bit of freak out because I wasn't sure that I did it the right way the first time, so I bailed and restarted. Welcome to Mindfulness for the Rest of Us. Let me take a moment to go to screen share so that I can show you something that will help you find the chat box, and that would be right here. I'm hoping that you see video right now. And if you go below where the video is and just click right here on this little box, that'll pull the chat up in a place that you can see it. If you've got the chat going and you're live with us now, please pop your name in there. Ooh, that's interesting. Pop your name in there and say hello. And I'll feel like I'm not talking to myself. But if I am, that's cool because you can see me on the video. And I'm going to do one more change and look for my slides. And there we are. I'm hoping that's what you're seeing. Mindfulness in the midst of frenzy. So welcome again to Mindfulness for the Rest of Us. Peace and presence for the meditation resistant. I feel like I am back in the middle school classroom, that it's a day when the kids were supposed to be at an assembly, so I had plenty of extra time, and I was working on a new lesson that I'd never taught before, putting the finishing touches on, and lo and behold, they came crashing into my room when I was still trying to figure out how to use the smartboard. So I'm going to do what I did then. I'm going to take a breath, and let's get started. I call this workshop Mindfulness for the Rest of Us, Peace and Presence for the Meditation Resistant. And my intention is absolutely, positively not to say anything that there's anything wrong with meditation. If you're somebody that meditates, that's fantastic. If you love it, keep at it. If you're curious about it, go learn about it and teach me, because I'm not great at it and I'd like to be better at it. If you're someone who's tried meditating and it just hasn't worked for you, you're in the right place. Because what I've discovered is that meditation has so many benefits and is really a great thing to practice, to help become more mindful, to build peace, to build presence. But it may not be the only way. My story, I'm sort of a slacker meditator. I exist in a professional community of coaches, many of whom are really heavy into meditating. My mentor, Martha Beck, was meditating between 90 minutes and 2 hours a day when I did my master coach training. And let me tell you, if that doesn't bring up a feeling of FOMO, the feeling of missing out and not doing anything right and really having to get on that bandwagon, well, I wasn't self-actualized enough to miss that. I really thought, okay, this is something I need to try. And I've tried over and over and over again. And sitting on the cushion, even for more than 10 minutes, is really something that I struggle, not necessarily to start, but to keep with. I understand that it's not meant to be instantly easy. I understand that it's supposed to bring up your stuff and help you realize things in a different way and notice things in a different way, but it hasn't really worked for me. The longest time that I ever did anything that looks like meditation is when I had a high school job and was frantic and frenzy and couldn't go to sleep. Night after night after night, I went to sleep listening to Gregorian chants. So I pretty much slept with a bunch of monks, if you want to look at it this way, that way. And that's the closest I've come to an ongoing meditation practice. I started up and try it, I let it go, I start and try it again. And I'm committed to trying again, but in the meantime, I wanted to learn different ways of creating peace and presence. So why bother with mindfulness? Well, I wanted to fit in with my peers. I I go to a yoga class in the summertime. I live in New Jersey in the summertime, and I go to a yoga class that is so challenging physically that by the end I get this mixed feeling of wanting to just sob with exhaustion and feeling like a rock star at the same time because I got through it. And those are times when during that final meditation, I really do experience what I think meditation is supposed to be all about: mindfulness, presence, relaxation. And I want more of that. I want to be able to tap into that more in my real life, in my day-to-day life. And I just want to get over the feeling of being wired and tired. So that's why I'm looking for it. And of course, there are a lot of other benefits that I'm sure you've heard about because mindfulness, meditation are pretty hot topics right now. Here are some of the benefits of mindfulness. Mindfulness in general, meditation as one route to mindfulness has been shown to reduce stress. It has a positive effect on high blood pressure, chronic pain, sleep disorders, and other kinds of physical ailments. On the flip side, on the mental, psychological, emotional side, mindfulness is shown to have positive effects on depression, substance abuse, eating disorders, anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, and it can help your relationships. It can help your job effectiveness. It can help your basically feeling good in all kinds of different areas of your life. So knowing that it could bring me those benefits, I wanted to explore it. The way I kind of summarize all those benefits is by understanding from my own limited experience and from tons of research that I've done that mindfulness can help us to build well-being, which is great and which is really important to me because positive psychology is a big part of the way that I coach and teach and consult. Always after I think of well-being, my next question is always, well, what about well-doing? If we're all sitting around feeling great, that's terrific. But there's, for me at least, an element of wanting to use that well-being for well-doing in the world. So kind of as I approach this topic, my first research question, if you will, is this question of how do I translate a mindfulness practice into well-doing in the world? If I'm going to go the meditation route, sit on my cushion, quietly observe my thoughts, and do the meditation thing, how do I translate that into my real life, into my day-to-day life? If there's another way into mindfulness, how do I make that show up as well-doing in the world and not something separate? So that's kind of my first research question. My second research question is based on what the title of this workshop could have been, this webinar could have been. Instead of mindfulness for the rest of us, I might have called it Mindfulness, the Slacker's Guide. My second question is, how do you get there quickly? Which sounds counterintuitive, right? Meditation is designed to help us experience a kind of timelessness, let go of worry about being rushed, about being in a hurry. But in my experience, it helps to feel results. If you're doing something that's really challenging, it helps to get a sense of a result. So my second research question has sort of how to speed up the process and how to more fully integrate mindfulness in our daily lives. So that's what I'm looking to accomplish, and that's what I'm looking to share with you. What is mindfulness anyway? I'd like to invite you to take a moment and just kind of think about what does mindfulness mean anyway? How would you define it? It gets thrown around a lot. It's one of those topics that we think we know what it means, but does it really? Are we really saying the same thing? So think about that for yourselves. And I'd like to share with you two definitions that I've taken from experts on mindfulness, not only mindfulness practice, but the way mindfulness can help us in our lives. The first comes from Jon Kabat-Zinn, and he says mindfulness is paying attention in a particular way on purpose in the present moment without judgment. So think about those, no pun intended, be mindful about those for a moment. Mindfulness is paying attention in a particular way on purpose. That implies intention to me in the present moment. Sometimes I almost hear presence and mindfulness as synonyms. So it has to do with this idea of not reflecting on the past, not anticipating the future. And the big piece is without judgment. Well, John Kabat-Zinn is a molecular biologist. His PhD is in molecular biology. He's a professor emeritus at the University of Massachusetts Medical School, and he's best known for his mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is all about meditation. And he's done lots of practice in meditation, lots of teaching meditation, and lots of research on the benefits of meditation as a route to mindfulness. So he's saying mindfulness is paying attention in a particular way. As someone who struggled with meditation, his approach was not the one that I was willing to try first. It's one that I struggled with. And last fall, I came upon a podcast on the podcast On Being, and I became aware of the work of Ellen Langer. And here's her definition. She says, mindfulness is the process of actively noticing new things, which kind of blew my mind, because my sense was that mindfulness through meditation meant to not think. I now know that that's not true. It's to simply observe your thoughts and not judge them. But this feels a little more active to me, and it feels a little more integrative to me. Mindfulness is the process of actively noticing new things. When you do that, it puts you in the present, more sensitive to context and perspective, the essence of engagement. We talk a lot about employee engagement in the workplace. We talk a lot as individuals about being engaged in what we are doing. Engagement is one of the 5 pillars of the PERMA model of well-being. Being engagement within is an essential component of well-being. Here's the part that really got me excited about this idea of mindfulness without meditation. It's energy begetting, not energy consuming. So by being more mindful, it's not like we have to work at something new. It's that we simply can become more sensitive to context and perspective in everything that we do. And that grows energy, that begets energy. That's something I wanted to learn more about. She goes on to say, the mistake most people make is to assume it's stressful and exhausting, all this thinking. But what's stressful, in Langer's opinion, are all of the mindless negative evaluations we make and the worry that we'll find problems and not be able to solve them. So she proposes, and her research over nearly 40 years as a social psychologist at Harvard is showing that by actively noticing new things, mindfulness without meditation, you become more present, more sensitive to context and perspective, engaged, and create energy at the same time. It's something I wanted to learn more about, and it's something that I'm looking forward to sharing with you as we move forward. So I took excerpts from Langer's research, and I really struggled. Part of why I've taken so long to launch this is that I'm a fact finder, so I find myself in rabbit holes of reading more articles and gathering more information and just really geeking out on reading it. But I'm also a high follow through, which ironically doesn't mean I get things done. It means I need structures. So if the outline is really, really right, then I can feel that I can move forward. I'm not totally sure that this outline's right yet, but here's what I landed on. 3 lenses throughout which I looked at Langer's research, 3 ways that I see her talking about practicing mindfulness without meditation that I think are applicable enough to a really broad audience, people in career transition, fellow coaches, fellow entrepreneurs growing their businesses, and mission-driven professionals, people that want to make their lives better on the day-to-day. So what I've come up with are 3 topics. The first one I'm calling Once More with Mindfulness. The second one I'm calling Reframe Failure for Innovation. And the third is I'm inviting you to consider mindset and perspective. We'll take a little bit of time going into each one, and I invite you to think of examples of how they might apply in your life. Once more with mindfulness, I'm playing on the once more with feeling kind of adage. And this one's based on research that Langer did with symphony musicians. And if you've ever I'm a choral singer, if you've ever sung choral music, or if you've ever played in an orchestra, or if you go, I hope you do, go to hear orchestras and thought about what they play, being an orchestra musician is a pretty cool job. You get to do something that you love, something you've trained for all your life. You get to work with really highly accomplished professionals like yourself. You are at the top of your game. You're in a job that's very, very competitive. And as long as the orchestra stays in business, one that you'll probably have for a pretty long time. You get to travel the world. It's really, really, really high prestige. But in her research, Langer was finding that a lot of symphony musicians are really kind of bored because they play a lot of the same repertoire over and over again. How many times can you play Handel Messiah without losing your mind? Every summer, another version of Beethoven 9 or another Carmina Burana. So her research was set up like this. She had 2 groups of musicians who were playing a piece that they had played over and over many times, very super familiar. And she invited one group to just play it as always, think of the best performance they ever did and try to replicate it. And the other group, she asked them to play it more mindfully, to make a slight change, to bring a new feeling, to bring a new perspective to the music. Now we're talking orchestras, we're not talking jazz. So the changes they made were very, very subtle and were very much about connecting with the music and not trying to go really far out of bounds. Both versions were recorded, and they were played for people that listened to the recordings not knowing which was which. By and large, to a very large degree, people responded more positively. They said they liked better, they enjoyed better the recording where the musicians were playing more mindfully, where they brought part of themselves to what they were doing. She did another version of this study with salespeople, and when salespeople followed their same script but changed it up just a tiny bit to reflect them, they were not only rated as being more charismatic, they also made more money. They sold more stuff. So simply doing things that you normally do, that you're well practiced at, that are part of your daily life, but changing it up in a tiny bit to make it more mindful, has real positive benefits. The final version of this that I think is really, really fascinating has to do with the perception of women in the workplace, and particularly women as public speakers. She had 2 groups of public speakers, men and women, and she divided each of them further into groups of people that were, I said that wrong. She had a group of women public speakers, and she divided them into 2 groups. She invited some of them to speak from a more feminine point of view, from a more female point of view. And other women, she invited to present themselves in a more masculine sense, with all of the baggage that goes with the 2 of them holding for that. So they did that and they spoke. And then she further divided the 2 groups, and she invited them, whether the women were taking on what they perceived to be a more feminine role or a more masculine role, she invited half of each group to give their talks more mindfully. And she didn't really tell them what that meant. She just said, be more mindful in what you do. And the results were overwhelming. Whether these female public speakers approach their work, approach their presentation with a male perspective or a female energetic perspective, if they approached it more mindfully, They were seen as more charismatic, more believable, more likable, and more informed about their topic. So I would invite you to consider how you might change up something that you do as a matter of routine and do it in a more mindful way. An example that I have come up with, and this is kind of a stretch, but I think it would fit. In my last teaching job, my commute was about 30 miles and mostly on highway driving, which worked really well in the morning because I was out so early. On the way home, it was hideous because of the traffic. And I would change it up and take a different route. I would go through a small town, and I found out that it didn't really take a whole lot longer, and it was much, much more pleasant. And if I changed that up, I got to where I wanted to be more or less in the same amount of time. But I certainly experienced a whole lot less stress, as well as a lot more present. So one technique to boost mindfulness, grow peace, grow presence without having to meditate is to just switch up what you do on a routine basis in a slightly different way, make it more of your own, do it in a way that's mindful, and based on the research, you will appeal to the people around you better, you will be seen as more charismatic, and it's a likelihood you'll feel more successful in what you do. A second way that she talked about to be more mindful is what I'm thinking of as reframing failure for innovation. Ellen Langer says that mindful people recognize that words and deeds, both their own and others, make sense given the context in which they're delivered. So she's talking about presence and attention to context in the moment. And she says that failure, if you try something and you failed at it, remind yourself that your decision made sense at the time. And she asks us to consider how a failure might become useful. She gives the example, which I suspect many of you have heard before, from the 3M company of the creation of Post-it notes. Post-it notes were invented by a 3M employee who was trying to make a new kind of glue, and that glue didn't stick the way they wanted to. It stuck, you know what Post-it notes, all right? Little sticky notes. It sticks for a while, but not forever. It comes loose and you can stick it again. From the original intent to create a product, to create a glue product that would stick and stay, Post-it notes were a failure. But taking that glue, looking at it in a different context, they were able to make a product that, I don't know about you, but I'd have a hard time living without. I'm a little Post-it note obsessed. So Langer says we often focus on a single-minded outcome, and we create a process that we think will optimize the likelihood of that outcome. I want to make glue that sticks forever. I'm creating this process to make the glue. If we fail, if we do what we believe to be failure, and the glue doesn't stick the way we want it to, there's a tendency to discard everything, to start from scratch, and start again, or maybe just discard it and not even try it again, which is worse. She suggests that from a mindful perspective, if you take on a project that feels like a failure, that doesn't yield the results that you want, a better way of dealing with it is to pause and do two things. Look at the outcome that you got, even if it wasn't the one you wanted, and come up with 3 beneficial aspects of that outcome. So I wanted to make glue. It didn't stick the way I want to. What are 3 good things that came out of that? What are 3 beneficial aspects of that? And the next step is to mindfully and with presence look at those unplanned outcomes and think about what could be positive about them. The glue doesn't stick very well, but I could put it on a piece of paper and be able to stick that paper and then take it off and move it again is an example of that kind of thinking. So the example that I have right now is doing a webinar. I'm feeling high anxiety, not so high now, but in the beginning I was, when I didn't think the recording was working and I stopped and started again. It was starting to feel like a failure. I still don't know if it's recording the way that it's supposed to. So there's a little bit of uncertainty. If it turns out that it didn't, I could ditch the whole thing and say, man, the webinar didn't work. I'm not going to do that ever again. Or I could look at it and say, what are the 3 beneficial aspects? What are the 3 good outcomes of this supposedly failed undertaking of presenting this information in a webinar? Well, I was forced to show up, and I was forced to get the information together in a way that I could share it in the public, even if it didn't feel like the best way. I got to practice. And I got to learn a new technology that I may or may not to decide to use in the future. If I do use it again, chances are pretty high I'll be better at it than having not tried. So those are the 3 beneficial aspects of the potential failure of, what if this recording doesn't work? 3 unplanned outcomes. Don't know what they are yet, but maybe one of you gets really, really excited about this information and wants to learn more. And you go learn more about it on your own, or we have a discussion about it. Maybe I gain the courage to actually contact Ellen Langer and ask her to be on a podcast with me. That's certainly an unanticipated outcome that would be positive. So that's a way that you can use this idea of reframing failure, not focusing on a single-minded outcome at the exclusivity of being able to go with what happens. Remember that mindfulness definition of Langer's, actively noticing what's happening in the moment. So again, if you do something that you feel like is a failure, 2 ways to deal with that, 2 steps in dealing with that are to first look for 3 beneficial aspects, and finally to look for 3 unplanned outcomes. A final thing that I took from her research about mindfulness without meditation is around the idea of mindset and perspective. And as a coach, I'm really, really thrilled about this because this feels to me like a scientific underpinning of the idea of doing thought work, of examining your thoughts. It's something that, particularly in the Martha Beck community, we do a lot of. It's the foundation of our work. I know that it works because I've done it myself, because I've been successful with it with so many clients, because I've witnessed others' success in doing thought work. But there's still a little bit of, well, how does it work? Or why does it work? And what's the scientific explanation for it? As much as I love results and I live in faith that if something works and doesn't harm anyone, that's good enough, I'm also really curious and I'd like to know what's going on behind the scenes. And I think Langer sort of talks about this a little bit with what I'm calling consider mindset and perspective. She says that our emotions result from our mindset and from our perspective. Things are not intrinsically positive or negative. We make them positive or negative by our thoughts and by our judgments. Looking through mindfulness through the lens of mindset and perspective helps to foster divergent thinking, which can certainly lower stress, increase peace, increase presence, and also increase positive outcomes. How to do this? Think about an event that's coming up that causes you some stress. A presentation, a staff meeting, a doctor's appointment, taking a family member to a doctor's appointment that has you a little stress. She suggests that you follow 3 steps and you come up with 3 examples for each. The first is think of 3 possible negative outcomes. I could do my webinar and nobody could show up. I could do my webinar and my computer could crash and it would not work, or maybe it was even working at the top of the hour and I turned it off because I freaked out and had everyone on a delay. I could do my webinar and completely make a fool out of myself because of my anxiety or lack of preparation or a million other things. Those are three possible negative outcomes, and they feel pretty negative, a little scary, little anxiety around each of them. The next step is to think of 3 reasons why they might not occur. I have a fantastic internet connection. I practiced with the technology. I practiced with the content. And if nobody shows up live, there'll be a recording that people can look at afterwards. So 3 possible negative outcomes, 3 reasons that they might not occur, and then 3 reasons why, if the negative happens, it could turn out to be a positive. Maybe I'm not meant to do webinars. Maybe I'm much better live and in person or live on the phone. Maybe I'm supposed to learn more about this topic and talk to people one-on-one about it. So those are ways that you can lower stress, particularly about a future event, by considering mindset and perspective. Think of 3 possible negative outcomes. Think of 3 reasons they might not occur. And think of 3 reasons why, if they happen, they could be something positive. She says that stress is caused by interpretation of events, not by the events themselves. And she also says that greater awareness of your thoughts and judgments creates greater choice. I see that as saying that as we become more mindful, we have more choice, we have more opportunity to live our lives in more presence, in more peace, with less stress, to increase our well-being, and circling back to that idea of being able to do more in the world. So those are ways that I see to increase mindfulness, to build mindfulness without meditation. And I wasn't fully honest, I didn't mean not to be, but I'm not entirely meditation resistant. And I'd like to take a few minutes now to share with you a meditation that's sort of my go-to. It's one that always, always works for me. I'm calling it Come to Your Senses. I learned it as a sense meditation. I've heard others talk about it as sense drenching. So what I'd like to invite you to do is, if you're listening while you're driving, don't do it now. But if you're in a place where you can get still, close your eyes, I invite you to do that. Take a moment and connect with your breath. Try to sit evenly, uncross your legs, uncross your arms, sit comfortably, tall if that helps. Just kind of let your spine float tall and connect your feet with the floor. I find that that always helps me. Take a breath. Gently close your eyes and allow your attention to go to your sense of hearing. Notice the sounds that you hear without any effort to identify them, to tune them out, to judge them, to be bothered by them. Just notice them. And consider the directions from which the different sounds around you are coming. Notice the quality of the sounds. Gentle, sharp, loud, soft. Notice which are further away and which are closer. And just hold those sounds in your awareness. As you do, add to your awareness your sense of smell. Do you notice the smells of nature? Anything coming from outdoors? Maybe the coffee cup sitting on the side of your desk. Just take a moment and be in awareness both of what you smell and of what you hear. Add to that awareness your sense of taste. If you're alone or not concerned about anyone seeing you, go ahead and stick out your tongue. If you're doing this with a group of people and they all have your eyes closed, go ahead and stick out your tongue. They won't see you. Maybe you just brushed your teeth a while ago and you can still taste that. Or you just finished lunch, you can taste that. And just let that awareness of what you hear, what you smell, and what you taste be simple awareness. Add to that your sense of touch. Notice the temperature of the air on your skin. Notice the feel of your body being supported by whatever you're sitting on or in. Notice the feel of your feet in your shoes or on the floor. Notice the feel of your clothing as it touches your skin. Hold that sense of touch in your awareness. Together with your sense of taste, of smell, and of hearing. In a moment, I'll invite you to open your eyes slowly and gently with soft focus and add your sense of sight to the mix. Go ahead and do that now. Gently open your eyes. Allow them to be soft focus. And see if we tend to be very, very visual. See if now that you've added that visual sense, you can still give some attention to hearing, touch, taste, and smell. And just hold all of those senses in awareness. Mindfulness is about being aware. And that's one way to do it. So we talked about mindfulness without meditation. One way to do it is once more with mindfulness. Do the things that you normally do in your real life, but change them up just a little bit so that you have to pay attention. We tend to get into ruts, we get into routines. Think about when you go on vacation, it's usually more fun, a little more heightened, a greater awareness than in our daily life. And it's not just because we're away from the work. It's because when we go away, particularly to someplace new, we expect to notice new things. That idea of once more with mindfulness is not only to help you notice new things, but to allow that to help you do things in a new way that others might notice as well. Another way to become more mindful without meditating is to reframe failure for innovation. Think about when something doesn't work, think about the context. You did everything with the right intentions. Don't discard what you felt like went wrong. Look for 3 beneficial aspects of what seems to have gone wrong, may feel like failure. 3 beneficial aspects, and look for 3 unplanned outcomes that could be positive. And a final way to become more mindful without meditating is to consider your mindset, consider your perspective, particularly around an event or an activity that feels very stressful. Think about the negative outcomes. Don't try to pretend them away. List 3 things that could go wrong. Then consider 3 reasons that they might not occur. And finally, 3 reasons why, even if they did, it might not be so negative after all. I'd like to share something with you as well as I reflect. I had every intention of making this webinar about as much useful content as absolutely possible with as minimum selly sell as possible. And since I'm not even really to the point where I have something to sell you, it's going to be even less of that. But I do want to share with you a couple of ways that I see my teaching and coaching and consulting around these ideas going forward, and invite you to stay mindful of them and stay present of them by either signing up for my mailing list or staying in touch with me through Facebook or my website. And 2 ways that I'm looking to put this work out in the world more fully is through workshops in-person workshops with small groups of friends coming together, teams, organizations. I'd like to get this work out into the world in a bigger way. And as a lifelong teacher, I'd love to do it in person in a workshop so that people can really dig into it more. And the other piece is that I'm looking to, sometime in early March, early next month, to roll this material, this mindfulness material, both through meditation and other ways, into a larger offering that I'm calling Calm is the New Busy. And at this point, it looks like it's going to be a teleclass, and it's going to include not only a deeper dive and more interaction with the content from today, but other thinkers' work that I'm on fire about. I loved Bridget Schulte's book called Overwhelmed, and I'd love to dig into that a little bit more and help people put the concepts that not only that she talked about, but the research that she brings forward. I'd like to make that more useful and more accessible to people. I really love the work of the Heath brothers, and in particular in this context, their book Switch, Ways to Mindfully Change Habits so that we can get things done, so that we can create change. And of course, anything that I do is going to happen on a foundation of coaching and on a foundation of positive psychology. So there'll be a big flavor of that. And just because of who I am and the way I show up, you're likely to hear snippets of Broadway lyrics and stories about rabbits. And because we're coming on spring and summer, there might be a couple of Phillies baseball, Jersey Shore, and Jimmy Buffett references as well. So those are things that are coming on the horizon. In closing, I want to share one more quote with Langer, and then I want to share with you a reading from Pieces Every Step from Thich Nhat Hanh. But I love what Langer says, that life consists only of moments, nothing more than that. So if you make the moment matter, it all matters. You can be mindful, you can be mindless. You can win, you can lose. The worst case is to be mindless and lose. So when you're doing anything, be mindful. Notice new things, make it meaningful to you, and you'll prosper. If I had to summarize that, I think the second sentence is my favorite. If you make the moment matter, it all matters. My hope is that this helped you to learn ways to make the moment matter. If meditation is your thing, rock on. I hope that this will expand your mindfulness practice. If you're still curious about meditation as I am and committed to trying it once again as I am and finding a way to incorporate that in your life, rock on with that too. But consider ways that without meditation you can become more mindful. And if you're absolutely positively meditation resistant, I hope that you've found some new ways to make moments matter, because they all do. Thanks so much for joining me, and I hope you'll check me out at florencemoyer.com. Follow me on Facebook. I'm there an awful lot. And here is to mindfulness for all of us. Thanks for joining.